welcome everybody to Elders of Zionism podcast. I want to remind everybody you could find us all over. To subscribe, to like. We're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, we're on Apple, we're everywhere. So please subscribe, like, do all that stuff. It's gratefully helpful for us. I am here with Guy Goldstein, internationally renowned. How many people could say that, Guy?
At least 3.
Yeah, that's and Golan will be back with us very soon. And I realized as we were doing this show the other day, you're a very funny guy, but when we're doing this, the two of us, and I got to move it along to the next conversation, I sometimes miss out on the humor. Sometimes I don't understand what you're saying because I don't have
Australian humor takes a certain acclimatization.
Yeah, no, I get it, but it's like I said, it's like, listen, I watch all British and Australian shows, and I know I'm not the only one that watches it with closed captioning on. And because even though you're speaking English, you're not exactly speaking English. And it's good to see you.
You too.
And there is a lot going on in the news right now, around the world and in America especially. But I think there's something that we really need to get into because it has so much to do with the Supreme Court ruling today over birthright citizenship, right? So obviously this did not get passed. Now, Congress, just for the record, can do a vote on this. And this is really what people often don't know, what separates Democrats and Republicans in America is Democrats learned how to use the courts, right? And bypass Congress. So Roe v. Wade and so many other issues, they went straight to the courts. Now, Republicans have gone to the courts. And the problem is when Republicans pick judges, I can't believe I'm going to use Steve Bannon now and his example, but he said, you got to stop picking you got to stop listening to the right to lifers, whoever's picking these judges. Because when Republicans pick judges, they never know what they're going to get. The left always knows what they're going to get. The reality is, Guy, I would much rather the House pick this up and pass this bill, and then it go to the Senate, and then it go to the president. But with Republicans, an awfully big long shot on birthright citizenship.
Absolutely. And I think when we've been around long enough at this point to see how the left and the right in the United States try to pick judges. The left will try to pick the furthest left person that they can appoint and get away with it. And on the right, the Republicans generally tend to try to pick the person who is most likely to be palatable to both sides. And the irony is, even the sort of the middle of the road milquetoast conservatives who half the time vote against the Republican president were incredibly unpopular with Democrats because it was never about consensus. It was never actually about finding someone tolerable. Now, I don't believe that the right thing to do is to stack the court with crazy people. I think that getting rid of him, I think that if we had 9 Clarence Thomases, the world would be a much better place. But at some point, Republicans are either going to have to understand that the rules of the game are different and they have to put in their own people, or the game will continue being lost.
Yeah, 100%. It's got to be the problem. It's got to be hardline. But the problem is, again, it's even when Republicans have the Senate and they get to pick, because we have certain senators, whatever people want to call those people, or people like Susan Collins who have to sort of like, take the middle of the road because she's from Maine, they can't exactly do that. And that's really that's really that's really one of the major battles. But listen, go ahead.
But I do think that in this case, the decision was just a bad decision, right? And I think that
it's a terrible decision. It's an absolutely, and let's explain to people what we're talking about is birthright citizenship. It basically says if you're born in America, you're automatically a citizen, which by proxy means that one day you'll be able to bring more people into this country, more and more people, family members, their family members will all get a certain amount of citizenship or rights.
Right. And by the way, for the breakdown of the actual decision, go to Ben Shapiro. The guy is a
Or
brilliant
Mark Levin.
constitutional. Right, both of them. But Ben Shapiro is a fantastic constitutional lawyer. He understands what it's about. He can break it down. He can translate the decisions and the dissent. Yeah, I don't think we need to spend too much time breaking that down. We can just put a link into one of the show notes for the video.
Oh, I
But I
agree with
think
you 100.
it's actually bringing us to something that's a much bigger conversation that's more in line with what we talk about, which is the nature of citizenship, right? Because this is just a question of who is an American, right? And one of the things that we consistently find we're not having a conversation about is who is an American, who is an Englishman, who is a Frenchman. And the only country in the world today, in the West at least, that has a clear definition of who is of their country is Israel, right? Because Israel starts from the foundational definition of we know who we are. Why does that matter? Because America also started from a foundational definition of we know who we are, we know what we stand for. And it's true. It wasn't ethnic, it wasn't racial, it was creedal. To be an American, you had to stand for what America stands for. And increasingly, the people that are entitled to American citizenship because of things like birthright citizenship and chain citizenship and all of the other loopholes in the citizenship process, they may have American passports, but they're not Americans.
Listen, I think that's perfectly put, but I think let's take even a step. Let's take it a step further, and let's try to explain to people a little bit about. So you had Bill Clinton the other day, right? Who and everybody's showing this clip where in '97, right, he offered Arafat, when Omer, one of the worst prime ministers Israel's ever had, offered up everything Arafat could have ever wanted for a two-state
And then
solution,
some.
and then some. Everything he offered more than they asked for. I mean, fair to say, except the one thing he was unwilling to offer was the right of return, which goes directly with what we're talking about today with birthright citizenship. Because eventually, if you have enough birthright citizenships, you lose America. So what is the right of return, Guy?
So the right of return is an invented right, like all rights really, but it's an invented right that's been nominally proposed that says that refugees have a right to go back to the place from which they came. Right. This right doesn't exist for any refugees outside of the Palestinians, by the way, and specifically for the Palestinians, that right has never been defined as the right to go to a Palestinian homeland, wherever the definition of that might be. The idea has always been that right is to go into the heartland of Israel. Why does that matter? Because there are only 15 million Jews in the world, and only about 8 million of those live in Israel.
And none of them agree on anything.
And none of them agree on anything except that they want to live in a Jewish country. Well, no, they don't even agree on that. But it does mean that you actually face a meaningful demographic challenge. And there are two, so one of the things that you hear a lot of people that are on the Palestinian side of the argument today talking about is they've moved away from two-state solution, and they now talk about a one-state solution or a binational state. What does that mean? That means, well, if we've got 8 million people who we've defined as refugees, and we move, and they have a right of return to go back to Israel proper, then the next time there's an election, 50% of the votes are going to go to the people that want, a Palestinian state. So technically, it's democracy because
But
there's a vote.
explain where it comes from. It's pre 1948, so they want to go back to the pre 1948 rules of.
Well, no,
And
so
again, it's
that
important to explain what happened with the UN partition. It's really important. Both were given land. Israel said yes. Palestinians said no. They want to go back. Sorry, go ahead.
right, and they don't necessarily want to go back to pre. They just wanted to take. Sorry, let me calm down a second and explain this in the simplest possible way. There is no Palestinian state today. There was an option for it in 1947. It was rejected by the Arabs that would then go on to become Palestinians. However, by maintaining the perpetual multi generational definition of refugees that the Palestinians have maintained, and the illusion of a right of return, which has never existed for any other refugee group, but they've managed to maintain that illusion, the idea continues to exist inside that particular movement that eventually enough of them will be able to move to Israel so that they'll be able to either, and by the way, they say this out loud: we don't need to win by the sword, we can win by the womb of our women. And for the record, that's the Muslim Brotherhood's strategy for taking over Europe and the United States, not just Israel. Demographics define who a people are. In the case of the United States, it is unique that demographic doesn't have a race or a religion. It has a creed. So in America, you have to have more people that believe in being in what America is than people that believe that America should be something other than that. The more people you bring in that want America to not be what America is, the more that becomes a challenge.
Right. Listen, you're bringing up a great point. And listen, this isn't for the people that are listening to this show. I just want people to get somewhere where we could not be crazy. Okay. So when you have a poll that came out today that said 97% of Democrats don't believe, in America, essentially, right? It was that poll on CNN that I sent you? It was like 97% are not proud to be American.
93% of GOP respondents are proud to be American, and I think 36% of Democrats were not proud to be American. But again, 36% is a huge number compared to 1% of GOP voters. By the way, happy 4th of July week.
You got very, and I want people to think about that. That's a frightening number. So getting back to a little bit full circle of what didn't get passed today. Guy said go to Ben Shapiro, go to Mark Levin, go whoever it is, and watch and read their opinion on this. But know why it's important. It's not a talking point, and this is always what bothers me, Guy, about things, is that people will take this and make it to a talking point, and they won't explain what the consequences are to these actions. And if people could understand what the consequences are, listen, why do you think President Trump won the Latino vote? Because they see the dangers in open borders. Okay. Mm-hmm. They see it better than most Americans.
Because the Latinos make great Americans. Right? They're hardworking, they're adventure seeking, they generally come from a Judeo-Christian background. They make great Americans. So even though a lot of them came in illegally at different points, the Latinos that have been part of America for a long time integrate really well. No, so I think what it comes down to is we know what this is going to result in because we've seen Europe, we've seen London with its 35% white English population. We've seen the streets of France set ablaze by the weekly beheadings courtesy of the African migrants. We've seen Sweden turned into not Sweden, and Swedes literally saying you have to close the borders or we'll have no Swedes left. You've seen Germany and their campaigns encouraging people to have threesomes with refugees for some reason. I can't even explain what the Germans are thinking. It's generally something degenerate, apparently. But we've seen what's happened to Europe, not because Europe hasn't got many people from many cultures, but because Europe has been overrun by people from cultures that are fundamentally antithetical to Europe. The United States isn't there yet, but it doesn't take that long to get there from where we are.
Yeah, 100%, and that is the point that I always try to talk about. I talk about that as far as, listen, I live in California. There are a lot of Californians that are scared to death of what's going on in this state, right? And this happens all over. They look at Newsom, they look at the taxes, they look at the crime, they look at everything. So what do? They say, well, we're going to move. We could afford to move. The problem is when these idiots move, they bring their same principles and philosophies with them to that next state. So where's the next state? Somewhere like Texas, right? So Texas, if we aren't careful, will become the next California because those people are voting. Are voting. So, as I always say, we're an election. People are an election cycle away from this happening. So let's not. People shouldn't kid themselves. So if you are going to move, don't move with the same value system that got you into trouble in the first place. That is
Well, and I think this again, this debate is an important debate to have, and it doesn't have to be had with malice towards immigrants, or it doesn't have to be had with malice towards foreigners, but it does have to be had, right? And I
yeah.
think one of the things that you've seen in every country in the world that tries to say we're a pluralistic country that tolerates everyone is that the more people you bring in from cultures that do not mix with your culture, the more chaotic your country becomes. And there is a point at which it absolutely destroys the country. I was driving around recently. It was a Friday afternoon. I was driving around, and all of a sudden it occurred to me that I was driving around and I would see groups of one or two women walking along the street on their own, um, just going places, wearing their holiday dresses because it was the Sabbath. And it dawned on me that I haven't seen that in Australia in a decade. You cannot see that in Germany today. Women walking on their own in the street, right? People get told, do not walk on your own. Do not walk through places where there are poorly lit places. Israel is one of the few places in the world where women can walk around safely because keep the jihadists at our borders instead of inside our cities, right? I haven't been to the United States in almost 7 years now. I imagine that in the States it's becoming increasingly hard to walk around unescorted as a woman because I hear the stories coming out.
Okay, Guy, let me just finish it off there. It's extremely dangerous for a guy too. Okay,
Well, at
this
least
is
you're not being beheaded the way that people are being in Europe on a daily basis lately.
no 100%, and I think it's important to discuss one of the many ways we've gotten here is through groups like George Soros and the Tides Foundation and all of his other shell companies and somebody like Neville Roy Singham. I don't know why we call him Neville. Well, can't we just call him Neville Singham? Although Neville Roy usually we always like with
We
our
like Roy. It's a nice short name.
no. But it goes with all assassins. They always give their full name.
Hmm.
But Neville Roy Singham is being investigated right now, and we've discussed him on the show. Golan's not here, but this is somebody that Golan truly everybody should despise this person. But this is a person that's poor, that lives in China, made all his money in it, made
So,
hundreds of millions of dollars in America, obviously,
mhm.
and is using so much of his wealth, his connections to destroy our country from China.
From China. And by the way, this is the same topic we're talking about. Who is a citizen? Who is an American? This person may have an American passport. He was born to a Sri Lankan family. He was he came to America. He made a fortune. He moved to China because he is an avowed Maoist and a Marxist, two very American ideologies. Um, and now he's the fact that he still holds an American passport to undermine America's democracy constantly to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, funding the sorts of campaigns that we've been watching in our streets for the last decade. Things like Black Lives Matter, things like the Palestinian protests, right? The reason these campaigns look coordinated and look organized and all the signs come pre-printed the day of the event and all of the tents look the same and all of the slogans are the same is because you've got a small number of incredibly wealthy people like Neville Roy Singham running multiple layers of infrastructure to support these things, allegedly, we'll let the investigation reveal the details, or you can go watch the episode of Golan's podcast on him, which covers a lot of this. But
But it also begs
ultimately,
the
again,
question.
it comes to the question of citizenship. Why is a person who lives in communist China, works with the CCP, and tries to undermine the United States and what it stands for, still an American citizen? Why can we not say, no, you have crossed the line. You do not stand for what we stand for. You are not part of our covenant. Your citizen is hereby revoked. It does not harm your human rights. It does not put you at risk. It does not harm you in any meaningful way. You are not part of this team.
I got to tell you, I'm so glad we brought this up today, because I never would have had this take and this thought that you're bringing up, and I think this is like such a really important question. I don't think many people have this take and this understanding of it. So, Guy, kudos, because I think it's such an important question. It's such an important topic to discuss. And it could be done without animus, it could be done without malice. Using somebody like Neville Roy Singham as a perfect example of somebody that has U.S. citizenship, has a passport, but in this, he's a devout communist, lives in China, and he's devoted to Mao and whatever, which is really weird. Mao and Marxism at the same time. That shows you how nuts this guy is. But why is he a citizen? What? Why does
And,
he? Yeah, go ahead.
and by the way, I think if we wanted to bring in the elders of Zionism take to this, right?
Well, of
America,
course.
the United States are a covenantal country, right? Federalism comes from the term covenant. It's part of the bigger project that we talk about sometimes. A covenant is more than just an agreement to live together, right? It's not roommates. It's shared destiny. If you share our destiny, or if you share your destiny with the people that are in the covenant of the United States, then you belong in the United States with them. And if you think that you can come into the United States and take advantage of them, that they are somehow either you're hostile to them or not, then you're not necessarily part of them. Now, if we take it a step further, this is a concept that if you go all the way to the source material, all the way back to the Bible, this concept existed back then as well. And in Hebrew, there is a concept called the resident stranger, right? There is a concept in the Hebrew Bible that defines what rights and what civic rights and what responsibilities apply to foreigners that live amongst you. And they do not have the full set of rights of a citizen of the nation, but they do have a specific set of civic rights, right? All the way back in the Bible, the source material that so many of the founding fathers used when crafting the Constitution, there was an understanding that there is us and them, and sometimes they live amongst us. And as long as you can distinguish between those two groups, then us can thrive and they don't have to suffer. And the biggest problem that we have with our understanding of citizenship today is in the West, we are unwilling to define who us is. And we are unwilling to say that they might be a threat to us. And that failure has led to the collapse of most of Europe. And it will lead to the collapse of the United States if we don't get our act together and realize we need to understand who is part of our covenant.
Perfectly said, and very poetically said. So great work, Guy Goldstein. And let's move on a little bit. But you're right. If you want to really read about this, go to, like you said, Levin and Shapiro and other constitutional lawyers and read their thoughts on certain things. But I love your perspective on this because you are Australian, you're now Israeli, but you have an absolute deep love for America. I think you have a deeper love almost for America than anywhere else. And it's a beautiful thing to listen to you talk about this. But we need to move on a little bit. So today, today the House had one of these stupid votes, Rashida Tlaib, uh, where she wanted to bring a war resolution where we couldn't. I don't even know what she was talking about with no U.S. forces in Lebanon,
A
and
resolution to prevent America from being involved in a war that it was never planning on being involved with, and it's not currently involved with.
that's exactly right. And
Like a prophylactic anti-war resolution.
yeah, it was the weirdest. I mean, and people said like, "What do you?" And you only had 22 Democrats voting against this. You only had 22 Democrats voting against a law, or what she
A,
wanted.
a law to stop the US from engaging in a war that it wasn't in.
That's exactly right. Way to
Yes.
go, people that voted for Rashida Tlaib, aces.
198 that voted for that, I believe.
Yeah, it's just. I mean, only 22 didn't.
Yeah,
So I
but,
mean,
but I think it's important to point out that's almost 200 people that voted for this absurdity.
yeah. I mean, it's. I got to tell you, yeah.
And Thomas Massey.
200. It's such a funny thing. 200 people voted for something that was a hypothetical at best. Good job. What's your like? What would her next bill be? A war resolution that we don't fight in Russia? Okay. Uh,
Listen, I mean, at this point with her, it's to say she is so far off the reservation that
yeah, yeah.
you know,
But she's not
I
alone.
don't know why she would have. Well, I do know why she tried it. I think that it looks really bad. I think the loss was an important loss, and I think that the fact that the loss was I think the fact that it exposed that 200 people would vote to stop a thing that isn't happening is kind of a humiliation for the Democrats right now.
Well, it's a Babylon Bee piece. I mean, let's be real. It's like the Babylon Bee
The
could.
House fails to pass that's right. House fails to pass a vote to stop the war that's not happening.
That's exactly right. And this is. I mean, listen. I you know he Democrats had a really. I mean, I know people. Listen, people are real. I know many of my friends, many people I know are Democrats, or many people I know. We're all friends, many of us. But the friends I have are not socialists. They're not communists. They're not anti-Zionists. They're not, what we've witnessed in New York. Now, it's a terrible thing what we're witnessing in New York, and it gets worse on a daily basis. The more these people talk, Guy, the worse it gets. What we learn about these people and the spreading of it. And the only good side of it is that if you are a Republican, let's say, this will probably help you in the midterms. This will help more than oil prices going down, which should never have gone up in the first place. But this will help more.
Look, I mean, maybe a lot of this is happening in places where A, they're cheering it on, and B, it doesn't matter who they vote for because these seats are so blue that they might as well not have elections.
I don't even think we could call them blue anymore. I mean, there's got to be a different color than
Well,
blue
the problem is the
because
color is red, but they're
no, no, no,
that's
no, no,
taken
no. I'm saying red is Republican, blue is Democrat. This is. I mean, this
green.
is
Let's
this
call
is
it
red
green.
and yellow. I mean, this is I mean,
Right.
this is.
But and look, I think that this isn't a new pattern, right? And I think this is the thing that we so often fail to recognize. What we saw in New York should terrify every American because we have seen this pattern before. This is the pattern that this is the exact pattern that happened in the Soviet Union. Right? This is the switch from from communist or from Marxist to Leninist. The difference that makes is Leninism is a violent revolutionary movement. Marxism was a passive revolutionary movement. It was waiting for a change to happen. Leninism was making that change to happen through violence. What you're seeing in New York is a shift to that militant version of socialism, of communism. It is dangerous. If you want to take it a step further, The alliance with Islam was established by the Soviet Union by the Soviets in 1920 in official doctrine. Similarly, in 1979, the link between the communists in Iran and the Islamists in Iran is what brought about the revolution, which gave us the Ayatollahs. This is not a new pattern. It is new in the United States, and it should terrify all of us, because even if it's just New York, that's something fundamentally broken about America. And it's something that if we don't address it, and if we don't call it out, and if we don't understand where it's going, it will spread. It will spread to California. It will spread to Vermont. It will continue spreading. The evolution from Bernie in the 2010s, sort of the harmless old communist, who cares, to where we are, to where we are now, is not a coincidence, and it's incredibly dangerous.
Well said. Let's move on to this. You know, the negotiations started happening in Switzerland for the MOU, and obviously things have not been going great, Guy. We've had a few missiles lobbed in different directions. I don't think Iran's were performative. I think ours were more performative than theirs. So there was supposedly supposed to be a meeting today. So it went from Switzerland to Qatar. And again, Qatar is in the picture. I am tired of hearing about Qatar. This is going to be a pox on President Trump's legacy if he continues to allow Qatar to do negotiations and there weren't even negotiations today. So you had Kushner and Witkoff in Qatar today holding their you-know-whats with Iran not part of the conversation. Again, an offense to President Trump by not showing up, by not being there, not that they care.
Not
But
holding direct negotiation, not even agreeing to direct negotiations. I
nothing.
mean, it's
Absolutely every
that,
day changing their story. It's about the Strait. It's about Lebanon. And so what did Marco Rubio do? We discussed this on Friday. And again, this is such a significant thing that Marco Rubio did. I don't think he went behind anybody's back. I think he was working on a deal with Lebanon for quite a long time. And
it was very public.
yeah, it was right. It was for months. And J.D. Vance and Witkoff and Kushner decided to, at the last minute or the first minute, to add Lebanon to part of that MOU. And both Israel and Lebanon probably would never have come to this agreement if J.D. Vance didn't put that in the MOU. I'm not saying J.D. Vance did that purposely by any means, because both Lebanon and Israel hate Iran more than they hate each other.
Well, and don't forget that JD Vance's big win coming out of the Swiss negotiation, the negotiations in Switzerland, was the deconfliction cell that was being established between the United States, Iran, Qatar, Pakistan, and Lebanon to deconflict Israel's actions in Lebanon. Right. So JD Vance has a lot on a lot of responsibility for this. And I think that Marco Rubio's deal with Lebanon, so far, the big criticism of it has been that Hezbollah says they're not going to abide by it. To which everybody just said, okay, like, you can die. Good. We hope you do.
But
Anybody
again,
that doesn't think that Hezbollah deserved to die, by the way, not American. Kick him
this
out.
is the bigger problem, Guy. That what happened on Friday wasn't highlighted enough. Okay, that's the bigger issue. Is that it should have been a huge win, a monumental win that would have said to all these idiots online, all these anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, anti-Jew, anti-West values people, shut up. This can be done. This was what President Trump was actually working on with the Abraham Accords. There is hope. Listen, we're never going to make that region a democracy. It's just not going to happen. Could we make it a better theocracy? 100%. Okay? Nations there have proven that. The problem that JD, Kushner, and Witkoff have caused, I'm so scared. I'm so nervous with what they're doing because they're moving farther and farther away from the Abraham Accords on a daily basis.
Right,
Is that fair to
and I
say?
think it is fair to say, and I think that JD, the Vance, Witkoff, Kushner camp, and again, it's very hard for me to say that Kushner isn't trying to do something good because he has a track record of trying. But I also know that the path to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And I don't think any of them are necessarily acting maliciously. I think all of them are trying to achieve what they think the president's goals are. I think they're misunderstanding or mischaracterizing what those goals might be, because I think the president does have a bigger vision than just ending the conflict. I don't think the president went into this for deconfliction. He could have had deconfliction by not going to war. He had a vision for change and for a new regional order that would make the world safer. And at the end of the day, even in Syria, where you have an Al Qaeda terrorist running the country, the fact that the Iranians are out of Syria has still made the world a better place. And that doesn't mean that Syria is now a paradise and we should all plan vacations to Damascus. As much as I'd love to see Damascus, it's an incredibly historical city, and I will probably not get to see Damascus in the next couple of decades at least. But Syria not being under Iranian control means the Syrians are better off. It means Israel is better off. It means the Lebanese are better off. It means the region is going to be quieter, right? And that's what Marco Rubio, with the president's support, is trying to achieve in Lebanon, which is technically a democracy. It's just a silly democracy that makes a mockery of the idea of democracy.
Now, the
But
New York Times has come out and said that Rubio has undercut, right? Those are the reports. I don't think he was trying to undercut JD Vance. I just think the deal was on the table. They took it. I agree with you. I don't think I think it's a very good point, and I think it's a very astute point. I think it's something very worth talking about. Is just because you're trying to make a deal, it doesn't necessarily mean you're trying to hurt people with that deal. It just means you don't know how to make a deal. Okay. It just means that you might not be the best negotiator. That happens all the time. It's like the old adage, the generals that were there at the beginning of the war aren't the generals that are there at the end of the war.
Mhm.
It's just that's just the reality of life.
well,
And, sorry.
well, I think beyond that, it's not just that you aren't the best negotiator, it's that you're not the most informed person as to how that region works, right? One of the things we consistently have heard about JD since this started is that he is horribly underqualified to be dealing with a region of the world that's not the United States. I'm sorry. It's the fact that's a
Well, no,
fact.
no, but no, you're speaking of reality. And Witkoff and Kushner's only qualifications are that they do business. That's
Right.
it.
And they do business, but business is business, and politics is politics. And the Arab world has a very different way of doing both politics and business. And just because you've mastered one doesn't mean that you've mastered the other. And you compare that to someone like Marco Rubio, who every place that he is managed, that he's put his foot, he has made sure that he is an expert on before he goes in. He consults with experts. He reads up on it. He often, he makes sure that going in, he knows the landscape he's dealing with. How did he get this Lebanon deal to happen? And again, just to put it in perspective, Israel and Lebanon have technically been at war since 1948. There was a ceasefire agreement or an armistice in 1983, but that didn't end the conflict between them. How did Marco Rubio manage to get these two countries who have not been able to figure out a way to talk to each other for nearly 80 years to sit down at a table and have this conversation? He understood what the needs of both countries were, what the pressures on both countries were, what the points that both countries could leverage, where he could leverage them, and what the points that would push them away were. That negotiation required a level of insight into the way that the region works that shows that Marco does his homework.
I think it's
JD
more.
is one of those
Can I say
guys who
something?
shows up to.
I got to be honest with you. I think you're right. I think you're. I think part of your commentary on that is correct. I think there's also something different about Marco is that he could be trusted. I think when Marco walks into a room, he's not a business deal. He, you look at his track record of his life, of where he's come from, and these people do their research, right? Just like they have, psychologists that they're dealing with before they negotiate with President Trump. They do this with everybody. They're doing their research, and they look at a guy like Marco Rubio, and there's something about him that is trustworthy. Everybody in that room knows if Marco Rubio is part of that deal, he's going to uphold that deal to the best he can. And that in negotiations guy is one of the biggest factors in the world. So right now, as that region is really still a powder keg, it all comes down to nobody trusts the envoys. I mean, look, every time these envoys have left Russia and Ukraine, it gets worse. Every time they get involved in a certain situation, it gets worse. So today, just to use this as an example, the Iran negotiators are like, we're not talking nuclear, we're only talking about the Strait. And then it's like back and forth manipulation because they can manipulate the negotiators, and that is dangerous.
Well, it's sort of like the Iranians now are trying to push to accelerate the establishment of that deconfliction cell now that the Lebanese and Israelis have figured out how they're going to do this on their own. Right? So it's not, so yes, first of all, everything that you said, I agree. In addition, ignorance is a massive vulnerability when it comes to negotiation. This is the first rule. This is one of sort of ABCs of negotiating in business that you learn when you're in your first year at university, right? If you don't know what you're negotiating about and the other side does, they're at an advantage. JD is showing up without having done any of his homework, and these people are running circles around him. Why? Because let's be honest, anybody that understood the situation on the ground would not have agreed to the MOU to include Lebanon just to appease the Iranians. It's that simple. Because you would know that there's a separate negotiation happening between Israel and Lebanon, and you would say proudly, we are having conversations between Israel and Lebanon to address the Lebanese issue. Thank you very much. That's not your problem. Second of all, because you would understand that what Iran is trying to do is to secure its proxy control of Lebanon in violation of the sovereignty of Lebanon. Right? So when you're talking about Israel's security and Lebanon's sovereignty, like JD Vance was talking about, Iran being at that table violates Lebanon's sovereignty. It violates one of the two principles that you said that you care about. And his track record doesn't necessarily show that he particularly cares about Israel's security either. So when that's the conversation, that is what happens when you do not do your required readings before you show up to the exam. And he is failing.
What?
He
Listen,
has
you're
failed.
100%. And I love, it's so simple. It's like, and it's so weird how he's changed his messaging. When he was on Theo Von, after Theo Von got, went on his tour of that region, a tour of getting paid a lot of money, and all of a sudden came back and Israel was committing genocide. And JD Vance was like, it's not genocide, right? And then last week, when he asked that question by an Iranian reporter, he didn't have the same answer. Amazingly, he didn't have the same answer. But there's something called moral clarity. Bobby Kennedy Jr. has moral clarity. So yesterday, he said if Israel wanted to commit genocide against Palestinians, they could do it in a minute. That's doing the opposite. The Palestinian population is growing enormously around Israel. If you want to see what real genocide is, it's not happening in Israel. It's happening in all the nations around it. And that's coming from Bobby Kennedy Jr., okay? It goes to show you, like, the world's upside down in so many ways because
Well,
JFK
to be
was,
fair, Bobby Kennedy Sr. also had moral clarity on
and
this when he already
so did
dispatches from the
JFK,
war.
and so did JFK. Let's be clear about that. He actually did give arms. He did, he was the first president that actually, I believe, the first president that actually armed Israel in not the not the way we do now, obviously, but he was the first. So it's exceptional to hear this moral clarity. And I think really that's the biggest issue with JD Vance is there's zero moral clarity. There's even when you listen to him talk to Bill Maher, right? So he was on Bill Maher last night, and I was talking to producer Dave about this or somebody about this, and Bill Maher's whole thing is Bill Maher. It's so funny, like he can't go Republican because he can't get over Trump refusing to concede the election. It doesn't matter that Hillary Clinton refused to concede, Al Gore refused to concede, Stacey Abrams still refuses to concede. It's just Trump, right? And JD Vance gets into this whole thing about the elections in 2020, and I was like talking to somebody, and I was like, you don't need to get into a conflict about why you believe that the legitimacy of that when there are so many um, mathematical equations, I want to say, that could at least allow you to ask the question and say there are a lot of implausibility. There are a lot of things that were implausible, guy.
Look, I agree, but I also think that it's 2026. President Trump is back in the White House. We need to stop relitigating 2020. Everybody needs to stop relitigating. The fact that we still talk about the elections in 2020 and January 6th, and these are still talking points when the entire world has gone through so much and changed so much, is a sign of how people are just attached to tribal talking points. Now, what we do need to talk about, and this goes back to the conversations about citizenship, are things like how do we make sure that future elections have not only security, but transparency and trust? Because there are a whole bunch of other countries around the world that effectively engage in elections regularly enough that that can count all the votes in one day, even in countries of 60 and 70 and 100 million people, that can secure the election without having to have all of these, all of these different areas that people can't trust. Put aside 2020. Why have we not yet had a conversation about how do we ensure that the future of American democracy is secured through transparent and trustworthy elections where we know who is voting, we know what they're voting for, and we are able to submit those results in a reasonable amount of time to ensure the trust of the people? That
Which again,
conversation does not come up.
well, it did. Obviously, the Supreme Court turned it, overturned that, and that was another brutal loss. I mean that was a really
But
brutal.
again, like you were saying, the court is not the place for this conversation. The Congress is where this
Right.
conversation is supposed to take place. And one of the big challenges that we have today is that our Congress people are so cowardly that none of them are willing to take the political hit for standing up and saying what needs to be said. And as it's July 4th week, and we're thinking a lot about 250 years of America right now. You have to ask the question, if you were to go back to 1777 and an issue like this were to come up, would the people in the Congress have been afraid to stand up and raise the issues that mattered to their ward? And I think the answer is no. They would have gotten up and they would have said what mattered, and people would have argued and shouted and yelled and debated, and something might have been done. But instead, everybody is sitting trying to make sure bets or vote for silly resolutions about non-existent wars because that's going to get them attention from the New York Times, right? One of the fundamental problems that we have in this country is that the real discussions that should be being had aren't being had in the places they need to be had. And as we get closer to the 4th of July, to the 250th anniversary of this country, the question that needs to be asked constantly is how do we take back the things that made this country get to 250 years? How do we go back to having the important conversations in a civilized way without barbarians shouting at one another, throwing things at one another, and setting fire to cities? Right? In the Congress, with people that are educated on the issue, making realistic cases, and passing legislation that's going to put the country back in order.
Perfectly said, brilliantly said. I don't think anything more needs to be said about this. I think we've covered what we wanted to cover today, unless I forgot something, Guy.
No, I think this has been fantastic. Again, you didn't say that it was the first of July. We're recording on.
No, I mean, because I never give the date.
I know, but it's an
And,
important
and
date
just for the
because this is
record,
an
it's not the
important
1st
week.
of July for me. And because and just so everybody knows, so we record all different. Everybody's got different time zones. I almost missed a meeting for a documentary we're working on because of all these time zone changes. Last Thursday night, I literally I thought it was 8 o'clock at night, forgetting it was 8 o'clock New York time, thinking I had 3 hours, and I was like, and I'm anyway. So it's not July 1st for me yet. So it's still
It
June
will be by the
30th.
time we release the episode, though. And
That's
that's
true, but
important because that means it's the beginning of the first week of July, and that means we've got to count down to the 4th. Important birthday coming up, and that's kind of why this week our episodes are probably going to be a little bit obsessed about the last 250 years and what made America great.
But I think that's a good obsession of yours. I think that is an obsession of yours. I think that's a very healthy obsession. Do they have fireworks in Israel, by the way? I mean, they do, but I mean specifically.
It depends how the ceasefire is going.
Yeah, does the Iron Dome like I could just see people shooting off fireworks in Israel, the Iron Dome.
You know what? They used to do fireworks in Israel when I was younger, and these days they actually don't do them because of the amount of people that are traumatized by wars. So
Wow.
it's a little bit sad, but then again, we have fireworks not on special occasions.
Yeah.
So
The only reason I talk about this all the time. I hate fireworks is because it scares my dog to death. I think July 2nd is the busiest day at animal shelters because so many dogs run away. And I know you're a huge animal lover. I'm a huge animal lover. I'm all for at this day and age having light shows. I don't think California should have any fireworks with the fires we've had. This is one of those. We have a light show. Do something incredible. Enough with the fireworks in California, but that's just me. People might want to kill me. I know David has bought a ton, but he lives in a farm. That's fine. Anyway, I'm happy we did this. I think we got everything we wanted to get out, and we hope people learn something from this. And I really want people to take away. I really always want the biggest takeaway guide to be stop with the talking points. Okay, everybody could have talking points, and you could hear the talking points. You could hear Fox News. You could hear MS, whatever they want to call themselves. You could hear CNN. You could hear everybody with their stupid talking points, but nobody ever talking about what got us to that place, what brought us here. So that's one of those things I love about doing this is I want people to know what got us here, how we got here, how we got here as America, how Israel got where Israel is, how Europe has gotten to where Europe has gotten. It wasn't overnight, okay? Europe wasn't overnight. I mean, Britain was our greatest of allies. They're not anymore. They're just not. It's just that's just the reality, guy. So I think that's about it. I said enough.
agreed.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody that's been helping with the show. I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody with their feedback, constructive criticism, whatever that might be. It's always helpful. One of the compliments somebody paid us is we do put a lot of time into what we're going to discuss. The last thing I wanted to share with, because I had said this to somebody the other day on Truth Social, I said, don't be so emotional. Like they weren't happy with something I posted because I wasn't nailing Vance. And you saw the post, and it was a very mild way of going after Vance. Okay. When I said the JV instead of the JD, the JV negotiators. And I said, stop being so emotional. I didn't realize I was talking to a woman. And whatever. I didn't mean it as an insult. And I said to her, one of the things, even with this show, is we try not to do it when we're too emotional. Okay, because nothing good is going to come out. You'll have the two of us screaming for an hour, and you will have nothing coming out. So it's like, and I wish people would take a step back from that emotion. And that's what everybody acts on social media, everything. It's all emotion, guy. It's all emotion of that minute of what's being said. And let's try to take a step back from that for a second. It's like, just step back. I'm not talking about Rashida Tlaib today. That's moronic. There's no need to take a step back from that. But a lot of other things, take a step back. J.D. Vance, not an anti-Semite, just has a very different worldview than we do. Just take a step back and don't scream. And that's all I want to say about
I
that.
agree 100%. And I think that one of the things that I really like about what we do is we also try to take a step back and zoom out.
Yeah.
Right? There's a bigger picture here. There's a long game here. There's a history that you need to understand. Right? Decisions being made. There was a decision made in a Supreme Court today about a law that was written 250 years ago. Right? How can you just assume that today is the only thing that matters if you don't go and read the history? I mean, again, it's 4th of July week. Go out, read some books, read the Federalist Papers, read the history of the Barbary Wars, read about what people used to think and how people used to think. Because my God, there's some incredible stuff there. I saw Scott Bessent, by the way. I think Turbo shared it with us when Scott Bessent was quoting Hamilton.
Yeah.
Again, those people who were thinking about the writing the Constitution in 1776 are still influencing the discourse today. Read what they had to say about it. It will open your mind in incredible ways. It's fascinating. It's wonderful.
Listen, I always say this, it's, in regards to the 12 steps, right? One of the things when I got sober was I wanted to know where I came from, where this came from. So I wanted to know the history of the 12 steps. So I started reading books about it, and I found it so amazingly fascinating because I knew what I belonged to. I knew who had inputs in it. I knew that there was, just Rockefeller and I'm blanking on the famous therapist, right? The famous therapist's name right now. No, Young, and Young, and so many different people, and just I wanted to know what I belonged to, and it's like when you know what you belong to and why and the reasons, you're okay with dissent. Somebody could come up and say to me, I don't believe in that. And I'm like, okay, you don't believe in it. God bless you, man. And, you brought up something interesting because Charles Krauthammer, the late, great Charles Krauthammer, on his 4th of July parties would read the Constitution at his parties. And I mean, it must have been a hell of a party. But I just think that was a cool thing to do. So.
Absolutely. If you don't know where you come from, you don't know who you are.
Yeah, it's exactly right. That's exactly 100% right. And you're so susceptible. That's okay. Let's save this for another time because when you don't know where you come from, you're so susceptible to the changes that people want to implement in that. You're not, so it's like when people want to, change the Constitution or change different things or change the way we view men and women or all these different things, they don't know where they come from, and they become so susceptible to outside ideas. So anyways, we've run our course. I want to thank everybody again. You could find us everywhere at eldersofzionism.com. That's eldersofzionism.com. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. Give us those thumbs up on Rumble. It's very helpful. And of course on YouTube. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you all.